People
Sure.
have
I
theories
don't know.
on it. So
I was just putting that out there. Not that it really matters. It's just something I find interesting.
So I'm kind of curious, just in general. We kind of touched on this earlier, but like why? And I don't think we ever answered it. I don't know if we will tonight, but like why did the kind of like new atheism, like the Reddit style new atheism, like fail to gain traction? What happened there? Like, and then how did it get like usurped, or just like fell out? Just kind of people forgot about it, and the next thing filled the vacuum. Do we know? Did we get some conclusion on this?
I feel like the thing that happened is just history happened again, and Reddit New Atheism was based on this, and history happened in this weird retrograde mode where Reddit New Atheism was based on this narrative of like a sort of uniform consensus progress towards a single point that was happening with neoliberalism in the 90s at the turn of the millennium. And then there was this seemingly regressive but also completely outside like interruption from Islamic terrorism that could be framed as like these backwards regressive religious people are the only thing standing in the way of a sort of world unified civilization. And then that world unified civilization started falling apart under its own internal contradictions. And suddenly, like, the ideological sort of underpinnings of it are in question again.
Oh man, sorry.
Yeah,
well, I was gonna say.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Ash.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. Well, I just want to say I just recently watched the Bill Maher movie Religulous. I don't know if anyone's seen it. It's pretty amazing, but I think it like pinpoints on that exactly. It's. I mean, I was pretty young when it came out. Watching it now, just looking back, it was like, you know, at this crucial moment, like at the beginning of the War on Terror, and it's really just one of the most like, I don't know, anti-Islamic, like sort of like hateful, like openly racist movies like presented as a documentary that I've seen. And it was kind of amazing that it was like mainstream. I don't know about liberal, but sort of like mainstream political canon.
There's a.
Hold on, let's let him finish first, and then we'll go into the comments.
Well, this is just to say that you know, I see that I can't exactly like pinpoint it historically, but I see that as like the defining work of that like new atheism you know, era. And now it's just like, I don't know, I mean, to speak about it kind of basely, it's just like that stuff wasn't fun. Like it was like really sad and like scary and bleak. And I think that just like from purely trend perspective, it just is like, I don't know, I think people want something like bubblier and more fun now, and a little more optimistic and forward thinking. And I don't know. That's my thoughts on maybe why, just from a purely trend perspective, like why that movement might have gone out and this new one coming in.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was just going to say one sentence. It's just like, it's too nihilistic. Like no one wants to deal with that for too long. You can't just live your entire life in that mode. Like it's going to break eventually. Like, and I just think it's because if you just ponder the world and ponder creation, like you can just see that like the answer in your head, it can't be pure nihilism in that way. So that's why I think it couldn't last.
I kind of personally agree with Scott Alexander when he said that the reason like new atheism fell off was because like the whole like around like 2013, the whole like woke thing like replaced it as like the thing to like rage over, and for like educated upper middle class people to like go on a crusade against like the ignorant plebeians over.
It's a new thing that you should be pondering all day instead of, you know, the nature of God, like the Bible says. The Bible says.
I'm looking at Scott Alexander's article right now where he called it like a failed hamartiology, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a consistent worldview, even, I would maybe say.
Yeah, because like for a while you couldn't like mention religion on the internet like back in the day, and every thread like devolved into a flame war of a religion, and then like suddenly like no one gave a shit about religion because everyone's like debating like race and gender, and then like even on like both sides there wasn't some like I don't know, like Christian opposition to like the new left wing politics. And like I don't know why in this narrative like religion would be like sort of like coming back, but
I think I think the new atheism was unique historically. I think number one, it arose out of millennial children of a Gen X who were raised by baby boomers. So they were 2 or 3 degrees of separation from, especially like an authentic, if we're talking about authentic Christian experience, a lot of Christmas and Easter Christians or that kind of thing. And then
Christianity.
And then just not having kind of an authentic Christian upbringing like that, and kind of the kind of like Gen X, like cynical, kind of like nihilistic view of it, coupled with the kind of like 2000s, anti-Afghanistan, anti-Muslim kind of rhetoric that came about from all that. And then also it came about when like the bulk of millennials were kind of becoming like intellectual beings. I remember being like 15 or 16, and like discovering that like Nietzsche existed, and I was raised Catholic. So it was just like, it was like a perfect cultural storm, and coupled with also the kind of like overwhelming irony, like irony bros and irony poisoning and all that kind of stuff. And I think that is also falling off too. I think like the whole, like being obsessed with being ironic as possible and nothing is serious, and keep a healthy distance from everything and don't have any passion or true, kind of intimacy with anything. I think that's falling off too. And I think those are kind of part and parcel of the same cultural shifts.
Yeah, I'd agree. And hey, just as a heads up, I'm trying to get people request access to speak, but I'm having errors doing it. So I'm trying to get people up there, but I'm having an issue. But also just to comment on that, I think there's like 2 things, like to what you were saying. I think the irony poisoning is real. I think what Ash was saying about it just wasn't fun is also real. And I think what Max was saying about kind of like new atheism failing to gain traction, but then like a new moral majority kind of feeling somewhat of a, I don't know if it was a vacuum, but that really took off. And I think people just didn't like when Catholicism was more of like a moral majority. People were like, like Gen X was very against, there's kind of like, we don't like being told what to do. And then it happened again, but instead of it being a religious moral authority, it was something else. It was secular. But I think that the big bummer about it all was that there was no room for redemption in this version. And I think that caused a lot of issues for people to say, like, this really sucks. I'm outed by my own group. And like, I don't know. That's not a very articulate way, but that's something I've kind of seen as well. Sean, go ahead.
Hey, I wanted to mention something really briefly. I think one thing that I think is really, really accurate as far as the ways in which that sort of new atheism started to disentangle is that they got more interested in being anti-woke than being atheist. And I think that is definitely one of the big things. And I think it really started with like sort of this whole anti-feminism thing that came out of a lot of those same atheist circles. I couldn't name the exact year, maybe around 2014-ish. But then another thing I think is also huge is the way in which like the memes around it completely took all of the seriousness out of their communities. So like this whole Reddit atheism thing, all because of like that one guy posting the in this moment, I am euphoric, not because of some phony god, but because I'm enlightened by my own intelligence. Because like someone posted just like the most like embarrassing pseudo-intellectual like nonsense, this whole movement started being painted as like, oh, this is just like a bunch of fedora tipping losers who like, are so interested in being contrarian and pseudo-intellectual that they're just stroking their egos the whole time. And I think that was like also a huge thing that made people start to turn away from that movement, was that they were like, yeah, these guys suck. They're lame. like these guys are all just like, fedora tipping losers. And that comes from, I think, from the sort of memes that came out of some of the embarrassing things that were posted on r/atheism.
Yo, Gio, I'm glad you're here because I wanted to there's like an aspect of this I wanted to I thought would be interesting to discuss, which is like how I feel like there's like a taboo in art about like bringing up this sort of like mystical inspirations for like a lot of artworks. Like it was a big, like I noticed like a lot of people were talking about like this I remember seeing it at the Guggenheim myself, but there was like a big like the I'm forgetting the details, but the there was like a exhibition of like what's your name, like Hilma af Klimt, and
Hilma af Klimt,
like,
yeah.
And a lot of people were like talking about it. I remember it like seemed to like somehow like the symbol like registered in people's mind, which is like the point of that type of like art. But like a lot of people were talking about how like it has its like her like inspiration of that was theosophy, and it was like all related to this like theosophical symbolism. But if like you talk to people like in the art world and like read the placard, like that stuff like never comes up, even though it's like the driving like impetus behind the work. Like same with like Kandinsky and stuff. It all just gets talked about on the level of like formalism and not like the ideas that actually inspired it. And then of course you go on here and it's like different, and people are talking about like what does it mean that, you know, there's this like theosophical like exhibition celebrated right now. Of course, like some people have the narrative that it's like, you know, evil or whatever, theosophy is bad, but like I just think that that was like a big thing I noticed. Like, you know, people like in the art world, in the art discourse, like people aren't actually talking about like what this is supposed to do, like what it's about. And then you go online and like weirdos like us are like kind of talking about like the core thing there. I don't know.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I have a few thoughts about that, but before I just wanted to really quickly say about the new atheist thing. In my opinion, I think you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Good. My opinion, I think that the new atheist thing, the reason it petered out, because of course it's cringe and it's terrible, blah, blah, blah. But I think when you look at the greater whole of the developments in the 2010s, you see that the narrative of the terminal sort of like end of history liberalism that they ostensibly preached, that wasn't going to cut it for the series of crises that happened post 2008 and onwards. You had this breakup, as I forget who was alluding to, I think Sean was alluding to, about there was, you know, the anti-SJWs, there's like the Sargon types who are new atheists. Then there's, of course, Atheism Plus, where they tried to cancel Dawkins, the Rebecca Watsons of the world. You really see in some ways the split of two different forms of secularized political re-enchantments in some ways, even though the anti-SJW the group tries to capture this like, no, we're still rationalists, we're still, you know, ostensibly liberal, classic libs. But of course that gave way to groups on the right, more or less, who preached a form of, you know, re-enchantment. So I think that's why new atheism went by the wayside. It really was a cultural timepiece where Western supremacy had like reached its zenith, and it could only have gone to total rootless materialism in all aspects, spiritually as well. But what you brought up also is about Helena af Klimt, is that there's always this contention in the art world between outsider art, which has that room to express the spiritual. Klimt is a great example. There's other ones. Art Brut, of course, is like, you know, famous for this. And you have this sort of appropriation of the pure formalist aesthetics of those artists. But those aesthetics could only have come about from their spiritual insights. Whether, and you know, as a Catholic, of course, you know, philosophy is heretical to me. But I think that I do think that without that, especially Kandinsky, without that influence, you wouldn't have had, by and large, the aesthetic movements of the mid to late 20th century. I mean, from Pollock being a Jungian to, I believe, Urshel Gorky, who basically taught all of the New York School people. He was a theosophist pretty much, a Rosicrucian. People don't realize this, but the Midwest School, they influenced the New York School. People like Mark Tobey. Mark Tobey was a Baha'i practitioner. He was basically a perennialist. And his artwork was largely inspired by Zen and Chinese Taoist calligraphy, but he did his own like version of it with tempera. So you have a lot of this, but the reason the contemporary art world has to sort of ignore it, or like how shall I say it? What's a good wrestling term? They have to maintain the kayfabe.
Yeah.
I think it's because they have to accentuate those formalist tendencies, because the history of art criticism in the 20th century has largely been a story of analyzing art for its own sort of mechanics and its own workings. And for example, I'll give you a good example is when you read Clement Greenberg's Collective Ecstasies. There's just one part where he talks about the influences of someone like Georges Rouault. He said, well, that Christian suffering thing, it's like not, my cup of tea. But make of that what you, I'm not making a commentary on, Greenberg's own, cultural or ethnic dispositions. I think that he truly didn't see what artists like Klimt or Rouault saw. He would, and I love, Clement Greenberg, I absolutely adore, but I think that the art world and the trajectory of art criticism in particular was purposefully designed to ignore those deeper tendencies, because they truly bought into the death of the author, the sort of like, or sorry, the death of the artist, right? And so you don't have that room for the direct expression. And if you read Kandinsky, direct expression of what he truly means in his own sort of quasi-spiritualist system is the point of it. But then later on, Kandinsky, because on an aesthetic and formalistic level influenced so much, huge bodies of art in the 20th century, those influences sort of get buried. The lead gets buried. So, and I think nowadays, more than ever, of course, like there's, terrible woke stuff, but there is, I think space is opening up for artists to, express their, let's say, the spiritual comportment in their works. But of
I'm
course,
losing him. Is anybody else?
Oh, sorry.
I'm still hearing everything.
Yeah, I'll shut up for now if you can, because mine cuts out sometimes too.
Oh, that was really good, and I think what you're saying is like interesting, because like insofar as those like critics did like sort of like paper up the like deeper spiritual inspirations behind these like scenes, it seems to like if anything have the function of like devaluing art, you know what I mean, and like making it like less interesting,
Oh, of course.
obviously, like the general public, a lot of people are like, what the fuck is the point of art? Like, it's just like these paintings are meaningless, my kid could do that, blah blah blah. And it like one makes it just like so much more like fascinating. People love like the thinking about this like occult stuff, like it's interesting, and it's just like there's a real reason behind it, and they like really did think about this stuff. It's not just like all the negative things people say about like modern contemporary art. So it's just like a show. It's like what I mean. So yeah, I mean, I feel like insofar as like critics had to do that, they like shot themselves in their own foot when it came to like elevating the value of like art, fine art as like a space.
Well, also you have to realize that Klimt did not do it as a sort of conscious aesthetic. These were spiritual guides and manuals. They weren't they much in line, I would say, art that comes out of spiritual practices, whether it's Orthodox iconography or whether it's the Japanese ensos. They're not made for the mind that the way that like these boomer contemporary art people took it with like they read Ginsberg and they read the haiku books and they're like, oh well, I'm going to do the enso too, right? It's not like a conscious aesthetic, and I think that's what is the point, because the contemporary art world, they couldn't grasp that for so long, is that art is not made out of something as a conscious decision to make the art object. Rather, it's something that is produced from another function. And so, art had to maintain its supremacy that way. So, yeah.
Interesting. Do you know anything about Rothko, like what his spirituality was? Because it's kind of interesting, because he's the one that like almost, I feel like, gets most associated with like religiosity in like the contemporary like curation, with like just like the way he's like discussed. Like people will look at a Rothko for like 20 minutes as like a meditative experience. And you have that Rothko chapel for like a interdenominational prayer meditation in Houston. But I don't know that he like was a like religious or spiritual man, but you might be able to correct me on that.
He had sort of tendencies towards theosophy and Rosicrucianism, but yet I believe he also had some degree of knowledge in Jewish mysticism, but he very much for all of his like very cosmopolitan leanings, like with, talking about, those people in the Midwest, they hate me, I'd never go outside of New York. He very much did have a lot of spiritual leanings that came from the influence of other people. I think you can find literature on it as well. So
interesting. That's good to know.
I was actually going to bring up, I've been doing some research for a much larger project about the like sort of spiritual dimensions of art making and things like that. And I specifically, there's a moment that I've been researching of Rothko where he grew up Jewish and sort of thought of himself as a Jew, but he sort of like intentionally, I think, it's sort of right that he was sort of into this sort of theosophy thing, because he was sort of intentionally about sort of blending lines and merging religions together and just sort of experimenting with these things, which I think is why he ended up deciding to do a Christian church. And there's a very good quote where someone asked him about what he thinks about the people who like look at his paintings and just start weeping uncontrollably. And he's like, that's great because they're having the same religious experience I was having when I painted those images. And it's like he literally used the words like religious experience. So I don't know exactly what he was, but he was definitely like on that train of thought.
Was the Rothko Chapel an actual Christian chapel, or I thought it was like multi, like non, like open to any religion?
That's what like the sign there said when I went there, but I don't know. Maybe it's different than its intention. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I think it's some kind of Unitarian thing.
Left open. Yeah. Though like the triptychs and stuff like that he made were like literally called like crucifixion and things like that. So I think he was kind of intentionally not being direct on what religion it is, but using terms like chapel and things like that, those are very Christian terms.
That's true.
Well, he had a relationship to Hyman Bluth, and Hyman Bluth was an explicit Jewish mystic in terms of his painting and his conception of the various stories in the Old Testament. And I believe him and Hyman Bluth had a friendship, if I recall. But he's really a more lesser known painter of the same New York school that I highly recommend, because he was daring enough to go into figuration like de Kooning and others, but for even more explicitly religious, mystical themes and motifs. So
yeah, this is like totally irrelevant to the topic at hand, but I always liked Rothko and Pollock's like pre-total abstraction paintings better than like the ones that they're more known for, like Pasiphae by Pollock, which is at the Met, is like probably one of my favorite paintings in the Met, and it's like the more like obviously like Jungian one where it has all these like just like bowls and like stuff and like fish like just like merging together out of some like primordial egg or something. I always thought like the earlier stuff was like better from those guys and like unfairly slept on. Another thing with like another topic that I thought was like interesting with like this whole theme is I felt like the Astroworld, like the whole controversy around like Astroworld was like a big like shift in this direction with like everyone and their mother saying it was like some like satanic thing. And like at first I thought it was just like the weirdos I follow on Twitter who were like going off about it like being demons and stuff, and I was like telling people to touch grass and all that. But then I think I was like wrong, because people on here were like saying like no, it's not just like weird circles on Twitter. It's like I hung out with my IRLs and like they were all convinced that it was demons at Astroworld, and like it just seemed to like really catch on in like the general like like normies who like follow like music gossip and so on. And like I feel like that just like wouldn't have been the narrative at all a few years ago. And over like, for it seemed from my perspective, like not really much at all in the way of like because like some of the rappers do use like explicitly like satanic imagery, like Uzi and Cardi, but like there really wasn't much to go off of. But it became this like huge thing, and like I don't know, like I wonder if that just like speaks to like some desire people have for like, we have these like mass, you could even call them mass ritual events, but like mass like congregations, like all these like music festivals, but there's this whole like I mean, Travis Scott like deliberately like cultivates like an aura of like dangerousness and like Dionysian carnival and like unpredictability, and like maybe people are like yearning for sort of like the opposite of that, and the opposite of like sort of like the like sort of like nihilism and like violence of like a lot of these music genres. And like even if it didn't go in like some like Christian or like monotheistic direction, like if like music festivals in the future are going to be more like on some like peace and love thing from like the 60s, about like trying to like people connect, feel like they're like part of like something positive together. I don't know, there just like felt like a shift in the culture.
Oh, would that like 60s revival be just as Dionysian though? Like, what do you think? Or would it be?
Yeah,
know?
I mean, I would say it is, but I don't know. It's like I mean, like my like optimism would say that it would be nice if we could stop with all this like endless like revivals of something from the past, and like people would wake up to like something we haven't like seen yet. But yeah, I could just see it going back to like the 60s and being like just as like a hedonistic, but with like a vague veneer of like peace and love, as opposed to sort of like the destructive type vibes of like Travis Scott's music.
That's like Woodstock 99 was supposed to be like that, but did anyone see the hit piece that Vice did of Woodstock? Oh boy.
On like Woodstock like 97 or whatever it was.
99, yeah.
Yeah, 99. Yeah, where they said like that was Woodstock 99 could be blamed for the January.
Yeah, it was the music of the Chuds, which is funny because those are like all of my like Korn and Limp Bizkit. That was like totally my scene back in the day. Oh
it's
my
such
God.
Like a bizarre narrative to put out, even by like institutional media logic, like that like
no, but they had to compare it to Coachella as like the progressive loving festival, which
I mean, probably like Coachella just like paid them to make that or something, but like Coachella's like Coachella's gone like pretty downhill too, right? I mean, I don't really know.
I don't even see how the music of the people that were there was like Chud music at all. I mean, like Ariel Pink and John Moss were there, I mean, as spectators, but like I would imagine those people are probably listening to something different than what was at Woodstock 99 is my guess.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, it's a funny narrative to think that a bunch of like new metal people were there, but I highly doubt it.
Maybe like Ted Nugent people, like county, like Red State Fair. But when we had Ariel Pink on our podcast, Break the Rules, me and Lev, it was like he was very like conscious of the fact that people like still talk about him being at the 6. People still say they claim he was in the building. It's like just ridiculous. But the Woodstock thing, I think it was a watershed where it's sort of, in my opinion, the one thing they did get right was it sort of spawned the politics of, I guess you would say, the young white male of like, the 21st century. It's like now that's the narrative. How accurate they are, of course, is like up for debate, to say the least. But I mean, just like HBO paying a bunch of like music critics from Pitchfork to do this hit piece is just kind of, I don't know. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the gap in that narrative is that there just like wasn't any like politics of the young white male like emerging from that until like I guess like 2016. I feel like that demographic would have just gone on to do some like legalized weed, or like maybe like Ron Paul libertarianism or like investigate 9/11 for a bit after that, and then like the whole turn into like the alt-right was like very like rapid, and it feels like that was like some mix of like reaction to the woke stuff, and also just like spooky activity, probably, like, it was my opinion. But
Oh yeah,
it was like
100%.
Does anyone here know the Sekhmet hypothesis? Bringing it back to the original question about the like sort of vibe shift, or like the sort of Sekhmet hypothesis was this. It was this new age idea from this guy Ian Spence, who seems to have walked it back, but claiming that there were these sort of like cyclical shifts between sort of like hippie peace and love vibes and like dark, restrained, violent, minimalistic vibes that were originally supposed to be linked to like sun cycles, and then he sort of shifted to the explanation being purely psychological. I don't know which one we're supposed to be on now, but that kind of reminds me of what you were talking about. And like, absolutely, like the Travis Scott stuff, like, just to sort of in terms of my discussion, my thing of evil earlier, like people who are sort of like TikTok new age people or whatever would be saying that was like an evil ritual, and they absolutely have a concept of that without necessarily having the Christian cosmology of Satan. There's like the whole idea of evil spirits, negative energy, archons, reptilians, etc. Like,
yeah, it's also like the whole thing with like the cycles of like positive and negative energy. It's like, this is, I guess, like this is not a very pro positivity stance I'm about to take, but like I feel like there's this like there's like very odd thing right now where like I feel like there's like all the like good music is like just extremely like negative, that coming out of like the Zoomer generation, and then I feel like the like record companies are constantly like trying to like astroturf this like sort of like light, sunny, like breezy, like post Tyler the Creator, like LA pop on the like Holland playlist on Spotify and stuff like that. And it was like I was like so miserable in when I first got to college in 2013, because like I was like prepared. I was like such like a music head, like all of high school. I was like the one like huge like hipster in my school, and I was like so prepared to like meet people who would like be into like good music. And then I got to college, and it was during that like whoa era, and like everyone was into like Imagine Dragons and like the Lumineers and like Foster the People and stuff.
God,
and
I remember this.
there was like a good thread from the person there's a good thread from like Jamie Brooks, I think is her name, about how like that like type of music like might have like emerged as like a just due to like iHeartRadio's like purchase by Bain Capital or like something like that, how it was like suddenly like a very like commercially friendly like thing to like flood the radio with. So it's like I don't know. I mean, that has like nothing to do with like the general like narrative of the space, but it's just like interesting that I feel like there are these like dark undercurrents, and then like the sort of like capitalist forces like want to put like a veneer of positivity over it, but like I don't know. I guess it would be
I
like,
feel like there's more and less capitalist, more authentic versions of like both vibes. Like you have like X on one hand, and like who was probably into some legit satanic shit himself, but still coming from a sort of like genuine artistic place. And then you have Travis, you have like contemporary Lord or whatever is the sort of like good vibe music now versus, I don't know, Boom. Like
what side does Boom fall on?
Yeah, that's a good question, to be fair.
I just want to say that Christian genre music right now in the amazing spirit of like Christian genre stuff always being like 7 years behind, everything sounds like Lumineers right now in that space. Like has like huge bass drums and, you know, like, I mean, that music is still around in the non-Christian mainstream too as like ad music now, but just
So in seven
just a little.
years in 7 years we'll get like Christian like 100 gecs and a whole lot of rap.
Yes. So I'm basically staking my claim on that right now. Like I'm holding down my space online in hopes that I can do that and make a lot of money in the year like 2025. So watch this space.
I feel that.
I wanted to bring up something else someone mentioned. I mean, somebody mentioned Carl Jung, and I was wondering what this group feels about Jung's ideas of the shadow in connection to.
I see a Jungian personally, so I'm a fan of Jung in that regard. But we were in like one of our Twitter book clubs, like thinking of reading Jung's text on the answer to Job, which is where he like brings forth the idea that Christianity should have added a fourth element to the Trinity, which would be that of like Satan, because I'm not exactly sure what the argument is, and like my therapist is like telling me like you got to read it. It's like way deeper than like what you're projecting onto it. But I was at first like against it because it seemed to be like the idea that like Jung wants to say that like God is like reflective of like the entirety of like the world / the psyche, and it wouldn't be like complete unless it like included like the evil aspects, and like that's why like I guess yeah.
Me and love how he throws this in my face as a Jungian every time.
Oh
it
yeah.
gets mentioned on BTR.
In relation to that, I like the Jewish idea of Satan being this adversary, where it's almost like if you recall that Miyazaki movie Spirited Away, where Chihiro had to go through all these trials in order to get her parents back, and at the end of it, all those spirits, including Yubaba and everybody, they just cheered for her because she faced up to the challenge and she met that challenge. So in that case, Satan and all these horrible things are in a way looked at as challenges for humanity to overcome, to resist, whatever you want to put in there. So I like looking at it that way. But in relation to the whole Satanism and music and entertainment thing, how much do you think a lot of this is pure provocation, where they want there to be more of a dialogue about this stuff online? Various news reporters talking about, oh my God, this is so evil, so satanic, and that drives up sales. So I'm curious, how much do you think it is that versus something that's very authentic?
The thing is, Travis Scott like didn't even put satanic imagery in his like music. Is like the weird part about that whole narrative, and like other rappers did. And I was like even pointing out on Twitter, there's like blatant like Christian symbolism in Travis Scott's lyrics too, in the song Stargazing, where he's like, it was hot as hell out in the heat. Then the storm came in to save my life.
He made Wash Us in the Blood with Kanye.
Yeah?
He made Wash Us in the Blood with Kanye.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Like,
so, yeah.
The whole like Travis... Yeah. The whole Travis Scott thing, I mean, I do actually have an anecdote about that concert because my twin brother had gone there and like he was right in the spot where like that crowd crush had initially started, but like I think an hour prior to when it happened, after spending hours trying to get to the front of the concert, he just like got a feeling of a premonition that like this is not a good place to be right now. So he just left. Like by the time he was already walking out, the police cars and ambulances were coming in. So I don't know what that kind of changed my view on the thing. Like maybe there was something going on there, but I still kind of rely more back on it was a matter of the concert they just didn't build the place where the people were properly. So like if you have that many people packed together, humans start acting like liquid pretty much, and one little disruption causes a crush like that. I think people really do people like to, like I was saying before earlier, that the reason you see a lot of people coming into religion is just desire to punish others or like find enemies, which is like a sublimation of like the political kind of impulse we've all been having for the past like 5 years of getting very involved with politics. So now instead of just calling things capitalists, you call them demonic. It's just been a semantic switch, but really, I think calling things evil or calling things demonic or the influence of Satan, outside of like very specific, like when symbolism is like sort of invoked, or when you can see like a clear historical connection of like previous sort of practices, it really just serves to obscure that, you know, things like evil doesn't really exist. Well, you know, it's not so direct as someone's like reaching, like the devil's reaching into the world, like with his hands and like changing things himself, like specifically in that way.
Yeah, and especially if you're like a Christian, the main thing Christians are supposed to do is like forgive people who do wrong, and like the whole narrative where like, oh, it's all the devil, these people are demons, they're possessed by the devil. Like even if you add a narrative on top of that where it's like they can like redeem themselves by doing such and such, it like seems like very like cut against like a lot of like what the point of like religion like should be, to like sort of like I don't know, like see what's not to like totally say it's all just like some hippie like peace and love thing, but like, you know, largely the point is like to like, you know, love people, like forgive, like have compassion, like do. So
yeah, like I think the thing about forgiveness, I think people kind of understand misunderstand the concept rather of forgiveness, where they think of like, let's say you commit sin and then that's like tallied or measured or quantified in some way, and like you're forgiven afterwards, or you do something that can like forgive afterwards. Like you view the timeline of like committing a sin as like very linear. Or I've discussed this before with you, but I feel as if like the nature of sin.
hello, can people hear him?
No,
Not me.
I lost them.
No.
Okay, all right, I don't
No,
know.
yeah,
Sound like
skip.
all right, he sounded like he's something interesting to say, but whatever.
I just added him back. Let's see.
Okay.
All right. Well, I don't even know how you pronounce this username. Lexon.
Sorry, did the app just crash for anyone else? I just like totally got booted out.
No, just you.
Oh, shoot.
You were finishing your sentence there, though.
All right. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, just like the conception of sin and like forgiveness and punishment. The way I see it is that like the reason things are denoted as sin is because the sin itself like is the punishment. Like I guess the basic example that comes to mind is like drinking or intoxication, which I am Muslim, like disclaimer, so I have a bit of different views on a couple of things, but I know that in Christianity as well, there's, even though like wine is and stuff like that is allowed, like there's still general rule against like getting too intoxicated or drunk. But it's not so much that you drink and get wasted and then that's like counted against you and you have to do something afterwards to be like forgiven. It's like the fact that you're doing something that is harming you, like that's the punishment in of itself. And I think that's.
Oh damn! Did he cut out again?
Yeah.
Yes, he died for me. All right. Well, maybe he'll come back. I wanted to ask about Blank. Is there any specific like reason you had to bring up the Jungian shadow, or just like open ended, or I don't know? Do you have thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I consider myself a Jungian too, and I sort of, as I came more into Christianity, I was just wondering about sort of this concept of embracing the shadow and what that means in terms of Christianity.
That's a good question.
That is a good. I think there are even writers who talk about that from a Jung perspective, because I mean, let's face it, Jung did have like quite a Gnostic heretical understanding of Christianity, even though his father was a Lutheran minister. But I do think that if we were to look at, for example, when he talks about the hero in the Red Book and other places, I think that it's really part of the integration of what it means to embrace a shadow self. Because, well, I mean, the Augustinian view is that, sin is privation of the Lord. So it is kind of like, if on one end sin is privation, but if Jung is talking about the shadow self as a direct property of the psyche soul, it is kind of in conflict there. But I think at the end of the day, the whole point of individuation is kind of close enough to that Christian understanding of a fully integrated self as well. Although with a lot of qualifiers and with a lot of problems. And I think that in some ways you really can't reconcile the two. I mean, at least not if you were going with an Orthodox or Catholic understanding of the self in Christianity. But I mean,
why can't you reconcile it? Why can't that be reconciled? I'm curious.
Well, I think it's because with Jung, he views the forces of, let's say, sin or privation within the shadow self as a direct property that is something that is just as important as a whole, as a totality. So in a sense, he's borrowing from a lot of different traditions, whether it's Taoism, Zoroastrianism, and so forth. Whereas in Christianity, sin and privation is not, or iniquity is not, let's say, of that schema of a totalizing self. It's something that you have to almost expel. So I think there's a lot of disconnect there. Like in specific, it comes up specifically in Answers to Job. So in his book, yeah.
I don't know. I just think the whole concept, like, I don't agree fully with it's not reconcilable. It's completely reconcilable. If you can if you can consider the shadow self as a form of, like, let's just say an example of just the parts of yourself, or even like in an outward example of other people, like like extremes of like evil, or just things that are just not, I would say, good, I would suppose, is that you have to embrace the idea that you're on the same page as everyone else. Like, everyone can get to those extremes or craziness or things in yourself that are just, you can go places with all this shit. It's totally doable. You're not alone in being like a complete psychopath. You could easily go down that road, just so you can go down the road. Yeah. That's what I'm saying, is that you have to, it is completely reconcilable, is the fact that it's like, you're not something that's like completely different from everyone else. It's like, you're just, it's hard to, I'm lost at words right now because I'm kind of a little tired, so I apologize. But it's just like reconciliation of this concept of shadow. It's just like, dude, yeah, humans can do some really fuck shit, and that's pretty much what you have to realize, that's in you as well. So that's how I see it. Like, I understand the Jungian concept.
Oh yeah, of course.
It's just, but it's like, I don't think dancing around the idea of like, oh, this shadow, like, I think people kind of put too much emphasis on this idea. I did at one point, and it's just like, it's just silly. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, well, this comes up in Aeon as well, in Jung, in his one book, Aeon Phenomenology of the Self. And I think that he talks about the symbol of Christ in the fish and so forth. But yeah, that's a very interesting view. I think, I mean, more to explore, of course. It's been quite a while, actually, since I read Aeon, but it is something to reconsider. But I know, like, in sort of like trad ortho and trad cath circles, especially like here on Twitter, it's sort of like there's been recently this like rejection of Jung because of those specific passages in Aeon in the Red Book, where he comes like dangerously close to Gnosticism. So it's like, anything, like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like what we were talking about with it's like,
yeah, his later stuff later on, he just gets, it's more of a cult like, and I know he just dances around. It's very fun. Jung's fun to read, and I'll give it. It's like, yeah, it's fantastical and fun. I mean, of course, if you've read Jung, I would recommend reading Nietzsche or any form of it, because you'll get like all the influential stuff from it. But it's just like, in a way, in some form poetic, but it's just, to me, it just doesn't really, it's fun. It's just fun. That's all I see it as.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to view sin through, let's say, in the Catholic view, which is coming from Augustine, which is a privation, but also a disorder of reason, of logos, then I guess you could make a comparison to say that what Jung is preaching is to not integrate that shadow aspect of the psyche is a form of disorder, is a form of going against one's internal logos. So I could probably see a bridge there,
Yeah, it's the that's a good way of saying it. It's just like it's instead of trying to integrate it, it's just that's term I guess would negate or subjugation. It's just like, yeah, it's there, just not don't put it into you. Just it's there as a possibility, like in your existence. That is a possibility down your road. You just need to be aware of your shadow, like you are in every day. It's like you have a shadow; it's always there when the sun hits.
I think that seems to be pretty in line with with scripture in general in the Bible, right? About how like dying to the self, dying every day, and it makes it sound like once you're saved, right? Once you've accepted Christ, at that point, you're still in this transformation, but you're also not bound to that self anymore. So you can overcome it. But it's there, but not necessarily integrated into who you are anymore. I think it's pretty in line.
Yeah, for the most part, I would see that.
So, go ahead.
Oh no, you're good. You're good.
Well, I was gonna actually go back on another something that was touched on earlier, but I also don't want to like change subject hard like that. So. Maybe I will. So I guess something I'm generally interested in as well as, and this is touching on a lot earlier in the conversation about the reasons for why there's a certain interest in this currently, in Christianity specifically, I think. But one, part of this whole idea of the fourth turn, right? There's like this a supposed looming crisis coming. I've had several so I wrote this like piece on just kind of like cultural reflections that I'm seeing currently in art and music, and how it embodies Christian ideology beyond it being like for irony. But one of the things that people had reached out to me, mostly just through DMs, was like everyone was kind of scared about the future, and that there was like we need a Christian or a religious revival. Some people said Christian, some people said religious, lest there be like a total destruction of the West. And I found that surprising because most people were not Christian that brought that up to me, and they're like, we need a revival because this is going to fall apart. And I guess I'm just kind of curious if that's like, it seems so foreign to me. Like, I don't know, maybe I just live in like another part of the world that's like not very online. And so like people seem happier, but I hear that over and over again from Twitter folks. And I'm just kind of curious if that's another kind of aspect to this. And what are people seeing?
Well, I don't know. Like it seems like when it comes to like spirituality or any type of religious form, I just think the United States. I mean, I'm only from this place, so I don't know any like European or from the other side. I don't know, but like I experience every day. Like I go out, I'm actually very offline, but like my few hours that I am online from now, like that I see the way people act and do things. Like I can definitely see that there's like depravity and just there's no soul anymore. Everything's just dead and it's a husk. So people act and say things in really weird ways. It's like we're fine in like the material aspect, but like holy shit, like to me, from being where I am, it's like fuck, not just like it's dead. Like it's just nothing is being produced like spiritually or anything farther than that.
Well, even the material aspect is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, go ahead. Say again.
Do you mind sharing what part of the
yeah, I'm from Northern California. But, you know, California is a really good place to see like what the extremities of like capitalism and all this shit is done. So it's like, yeah, you can see it in Southern California, LA to San Francisco, all those fucked up places. I'm in a very somewhat fortunate spot in Northern California. So I got this more of a conservative, like Christian area. But, you know, I see it, the pipeline come from the Sacramento area through all the way down, and you know this from the high. Yeah, it's fucked.
I think that there's definitely. Oh, go ahead. Actually, go ahead.
No, you go, Gio.
Oh no, really quickly, I was just going to say that I certainly agree with that opinion. I think that definitely there has to be something. There has to be sort of a counterweight to the forces of like whatever you want to call it, like global neoliberalism or something. There definitely has to be something that gives people a sense of authenticity that is more than like I mean I guess people make a meme of it, but like they talk about how the metaverse and VR and whatnot are like threatening the order of things and that we're going to sink into some kind of like wild fantasy. I mean, whether that's overblown or not, I think people are going to increasingly gravitate more towards the inward and the corporeal rather than the online and the simulated. I think that's just natural impulse people have. And it's not something that is a deterministic, like, well, you're just afraid of progress. It's more of like, well, we're afraid of like man-made horrors beyond our dreams. So I don't know what's going to happen. I think that it will become a less like insane idea. Like it's already a less insane idea than say if we were in, I don't know, early YouTube 2007 new atheism, Reddit logic. But it's like nowadays, I think as time goes on, the idea of a religious revival will become less insane for more people. So
what happens now? What do we think about like preaching the gospel as in like a real way?
You must return to worship of Jupiter and sacrifice a hecatomb of oxen and a herd,
Well, there we go. Well, there you go. I mean, that's yeah.
I'm all for it. All for the gospel part, I guess, not the Jupiter sacrifice.
What you say? I did not hear. Sorry.
No, I was just saying I'm all for gospel preaching, but that's like I'm like 100% God-pilled. So.
Yeah,
so the experience, like I actually have it like just an anecdotal, but I think it applied to almost everyone. Is like you can preach the gospel and say these things, but the problem that I think a lot of people have is that they don't take the realization of like when you read stories or Jesus's teachings or any of that form, they don't realize that you have to almost in a sense integrate it. You have to understand how to applicably apply this in a real-time aspect, where if you read these stories and you have that perception of like, oh, you know what, I read something that's similar to this situation I'm in, like the crazy part about that stuff is like who said it best? Someone said, you don't read the Bible reads you. So it was a really crazy way to look at it, but it's true because it's like all those things that you can learn from biblically, you can apply them and they hold true. It's fucking insane. And that's why it's like, I strongly advise, like what you want to do, read the Bible and just find people that are interested, even if it's not like congregating or just doing something, just read the Bible. And I know, hey, it's hard. It's a big book and I'm struggling with it. But if you do it and then it can actually take what the stories or something that's inside of it and abstract, like take it out and learn from it and apply it, then it's like, it becomes your reality. It's crazy. Not like crazy, but it's just insane to like watch it happen.
Anyone else want to speak?
One thing I feel about Christianity is that I feel like most preachers just like aren't that great. It's like something I've noticed. Like I don't know, that might be like a really controversial thing to say, but
it's not. They're terrible. They're absolutely garbage. I'll be real with it.
Yeah,
I'll be real and say that the church has largely failed in North America in terms of apologetics and pedagogy of the faith. I mean, come on, that's just blatantly obvious.
The church is dead all over the place, Gio. It doesn't exist anywhere.
I would say that I would push back, but I don't know. I'm starting to slide with that opinion. It's really blackpilling. So yeah.
It's even in Poland, where they say it is like based Catholic place. I hear stories from Polish friends who are like like young teenager, and they say their sister gets in a stall by their lesbian friends. There is no God in these people, no presence of a Jupiter to keep them in line. And beach slap them.
I would say I think in general, at least in the West, like the cultural Christianity side of things, like what maybe like if you grew up in the 90s and 80s and even early 2000s, like I think that version of church culture is primarily just for itself. It's pretty dead. I'm involved in like the Pentecostal community by and large. And that scene is like vibrant. And that's like what the fastest growing denomination right now in the church. And it's like I think the second biggest only to Catholicism now. But that scene even is like, hey, the church is dead because no one actually like listens to God anymore. And it's very vibrant. And that community, like there's a lot of missions work. And so I see a lot of stuff. I hear a lot of reports from like the global South and from like Middle Eastern areas, like where that's like where the hotbed of Christian activity is happening, more so than like the West.
But I don't think you can properly call something like Pentecostalism, like part of the church. I mean, it's a non-Trinitarian, deviation.
How is it? What do you mean non-Trinitarian? It doesn't believe in the Trinity, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
It fully does.
Just because they call themselves Pentecostal does not mean they believe in the Trinity. They fully don't.
Are you talking about the oneness Pentecostals? I think that's different.
Yeah, there's a bunch. I think like labels in the church are by and large always very off. And when I say Pentecostal, like I would imagine a Pentecostal would say you're not Pentecostal, but like it's better than like charismatic but that's probably more aligned with what I would probably the group I run with.
Not to be mean, Tyler, but I am very suspicious of a religion which sends its people to the least educated and dumbest parts of the world and uses that to swell their numbers. You know what I am saying? It is like you're either taking advantage of their stupidity. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm sure that happens, but I don't think that's the intent, or I guess I should say the Jesus intent would be not to like go and be imperialistic about it, but like to help people. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I think the thing about like an education kind of unchristian in itself. I mean, who cares? Whatever. Like, people don't need to read to be like Christian. Like, you can be illiterate and be Christian. It doesn't matter. But I think Pentecostalism is like evil in different ways than that.
So, Tyler, if I could just ask a quick question. Pentecostalism and like maybe not necessarily charismatism, but like that sort of very emotive and emotional kind of mystical side of Protestantism. How much theology do you think the average practitioner would grasp?
Yeah, I think an interesting idea is that like that section of the church is like more focused on experience. But from my understanding is that I think that probably was true for a while. However, I think they kind of discovered that like, hey, we're always getting railed on for having a bad poor theology or less discussion of like scripture. So it seems like they've responded, and it's now, full of a lot of like theology bro types where they care a lot about that stuff now. But there's obviously a very emotional side. I think the trend I'm seeing is people want to bring together the intellectual, like the rational and the emotional experiences together. Like that's the current movement I'm seeing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Apart from like extremely online, trad theology discourse, which is very like alienating to most people. I mean, you need a bit of both, and I think that's the original purpose, at least in my view of the Christian faith. Because, I mean, going like completely one way or the other is sort of going to alienate huge sections of people or even lead to like outright heresy. I mean, that's another possibility as well. So.
Yeah, I think it was like, oh, never mind. I totally forgot the scripture. So I'm not even going to say it, or try to attempt to. But I think, I can't remember who it was. I'll maybe try to look it up. But it was a guy who wrote about how basically the entire like Western thought was basically transformed by Christianity, and how even groups today that seem somewhat hostile, people who are like, and I think one of the examples they mentioned was like BLM or something. They said that wouldn't even be an option. That's like a Christian movement, right? Like it's inspired by Christianity in general, where pre-Christ era, like there was no justice movements. There were no like charitable things per se. I mean, by and large.
This is wrong. This is Christian shit.
At all true.
But
this is like pure Christian propaganda, man. I'm sorry.
Well,
to
this
say.
guy's not Christian, I guess. So I got to find his name. But that was the general idea, and I'm trying to think of where I was going with that. But I know I totally lost the train of thought. Let me find his name.
You're right.
The concept of mercy existed before Christ.
Yeah, I don't think that it like all good things happen post Christ.
Yeah, but it kind of wasn't like a total mercy the way it is Christianity, and it's different.
I mean, I think that it's something that is literally in the Book of Revelation if you're looking for it. But like anything, all those kinds of movements that are like pseudo religious, including like mass political movements, is it's like Christ without Christ is Antichrist, right? Like it's all of the trappings of Christ without like the forgiveness of sins and that kind of thing, I mean, it's Antichrist is like really very thin line between Christ and Antichrist,
I feel like the way this discussion has devolved into doctrinal infighting is very much vindicating the thing Lixon was saying earlier about like the ways people sort of like interact with religion right now. And I'm just sort of like, I don't know, trying to compare it in my head mentally with my hazy memories. Like the first place I spent a lot of time online was a place called fucking Wonder Cafe, which was like a forum hosted by the United Church of Canada. And it was like almost there was like a few new atheists there, but almost everyone was some kind of religious. And like, it was just like people had like spirited debates, but it was like way nicer than anything on the internet today, and also way more sincere in people's faith than it feels like a lot of stuff is on the internet today. I don't think those are contradictory at all.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, go for it.
Well, I was kind of confused about what Lixon was saying, and so please forgive me if I maybe not getting it or have like midwit takes. But he was saying like religion and politics have become entwined again almost, and I don't see how you can unentwine them, right? I mean, I'm
that's true, but it's
the reality
also a
is
particular way people do politics online, which isn't coterminous with the idea of politics either.
I was going to say that politics and religion have always been entwined. Gio, I know, reads Vola, and he liked to talk about the Guelph and the Gilibine conflict in northern Italy, and many sort of kingdoms were sort of like Christianized through political means. Like I think it was Queen Jadwiga. She spread her legs to a big Lithuanian man who was pagan. And she says, you can only have if you submit to Christ. And you say, okay, I do it. But it made a great political entity as a result. So this happened many times.
Even Junior Soprano said, what are you, a Ghibelline going over there? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Steph.
No, just, religion is imbued with everything. I mean, it's like everyone is like has some sort of cosmology. It can't not be imbued with politics.
How? What?
The concept of the state is a divine thing,
Yeah, like we have different languages for it now, different like whatever, but like religion is deeply entwined with everything, especially mass political movements. I mean, Lenin is still in a mausoleum, like that's like a holy site to people, like,
up until the gay Enlightenment, the king
I
and
don't
the
know.
rules were considered divine.
I don't know. It's just the way it was said. It was confusing at first. So it's like you're saying everything has an imbued like underpinning of religious or religion and underneath it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I don't know. I have to think on that one. Because I can totally understand. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go. Finish your point.
No, I could totally understand why politics and religion totally, it intertwine easily because it's like it's the form of categorization. Like everyone wants to be separated or identify as such or one thing, and that's why I ultimately find if everyone wants to reconcile or, not fight about particulars and everything. I just think honestly, it's just the obvious answer everyone should know is just Jesus. It's just like follow Jesus' teachings and like you get your answers right there. It's like he was never wrong. Just do that and you wipe out all the categorizing. You get the absolute truth of things, and you can walk in that path. That's how you can get rid of that.
It's like I think problem. Like the thing is, I think not just even day-to-day politics, I think has within it very like underlying metaphysical assumptions, even though we live in a society which largely tries to deny those things or has, had a arc of history bends towards blah, 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 Enlightenment liberalism. Like those are still assumptions, even via negativa, than what we would normally have in like the vast majority of human history, which was an explicit divine right of kings or divine right of a tribe or sect. Nowadays, I think that people are just starting to sort of realize that this underlying metaphysical reality to every political decision, like even day-to-day, like even economics, there was this one, I know people used to laugh at him, but it's kind of like a good idea now. Not a good idea, but like a true one. The guy that said that animal spirits run the economy or something like that. Like even economics largely, I think, is reading tea leaves. And I think that the way that people, because I'm like totally ignorant of this because I'm not a crypto guy, but the way people even talk about crypto and the blockchain and economics in the future in a cashless society almost is like a weird form of like religious ritualism. So it's very interesting. I even know I know it's like a meme, like Nick Land, he has that book on crypto and blockchain, and it's almost like quasi-metaphysical terms that people tend to talk about it. I mean, it's even like something as hard-nosed as economics is not immune to, because, economics always had a religious component, always had sort of a, what was that book that Baudrillard wrote? The what's it called? The symbolic exchange. So even something as economics, something that was by definition quantitative, has a sort of a metaphysical comportment to it, an aspect. So, yeah.
Well, and economics is partly, responsible for the developments of religion through time, like the forgiveness of debts and things like that is very important in terms of, I mean, even ancient Egyptian religion was very centered around what your class was,
Most religions were pre-Abrahamic explosion,
Right, and I mean that's the thing that is that I think people are should get hip to is that Christ was the one who created a universal religion, and then later it was like Muhammad and all that, and maybe you could call Buddhism like universal religion like that too, but in a lens of like a proper kind of institutionalized religion is only something that happened since around the first century BC. But before that, people were kind of like they are now. Like religion was just, like you have your own little cosmologies, and for a lot of people, that's like Neil deGrasse Tyson or whatever. But most people don't think about it. But there is something beneath that, But to actually do you know what I'm saying? Like the categorization of something as such only really happened with Christ. It's I mean, not to talk about astrology, but it's very Piscean. And now we're kind of, leaving the Piscean age. So,
It really depends, because it's like when you say that, like, I find it like you know what? I'm so tired. I apologize. I got off fucking work. I'm gonna just stay quiet for a minute. I apologize.
No, please. I mean, I'm interested in what you have to say.
I do too. I'm trying to say it, but it's just like my brain's all scattered right now. So I'll get to it in just a second. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
By the way, I found the book. It was called Dominion by Tom Holland, and it was how Christian revolution remade the world. If anyone's interested.
I mean, the thesis, from the title seems to hold up, and everyone is claiming now to be a universal religion these days, but it's kind of, you get to a point where you're so universal that there's nothing left, and it all kind of splinters. It's kind of beautiful in a way. Does anyone else have anything to say?
I just want to say that universal religion is not something that is like new to the last millennia or two. Like, it was a sort of common knowledge, whether you were like, sorry for my accent, I'm Albanian, by the way, which is why I might have dumb takes.
Oh no, I'm blocking you immediately right now. Now that you've revealed,
please.
I'm kidding, my friend. I'm kidding.
Okay, but it was like a common knowledge that, like, Caesar wrote about this in his commentary on the Gallic Wars, and when Tacitus goes north into Germania, he also writes this in his book, that like he has no sort of like he never sees the religion of the Gauls or the British or the Germans as like completely a separate idea from his own. Like, he goes somewhere, he's like, oh, this is just their version of a Mercury. This is just their version of Jupiter. Like that, it was like, we are all kind of the same, but we just have different names for them.
But the thing that breaks that thread was Judaism. I mean, because the Romans were like so perplexed.
Yes, Abrahamism.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, but the thing, you could say that about paganism. Paganism is very welcoming and friendly,
It is not welcoming and friendly to things which try to destroy it,
No, that's not true. That's simply not true. I mean, you can incorporate all kinds of things.
Yeah.
You see this. You can incorporate all kinds of things into the. I mean, we're talking like real paganism, like shamanism and like Siberian, like Native American, like old European, like. A kind of universal religion that says this is the way. There are not many paths, but there's one way. Is something that was very innovative of Christ and maybe Buddha.
Well, I have something to say about that. The thing you mentioned about the universal religion, I don't think it started either with Christianity or Abrahamism. I think it started with Zoroastrianism, because Persia established itself before Christ as an empire that covers everything. So, and remember that the Persian Empire...
Gio, can you mute yourself?
And remember that the Persian Empire that invaded the Greeks was an empire established by a believer in Ahura Mazda and a follower of Zoroaster, of Zarathustra. So I think it didn't start with the religious aspects as a declaration of faith, but I think it began to exist, this idea of a universal religion, as empires were establishing themselves as representing everything in the known world. Every empire that claimed to be an empire wanted to be all-encompassing. And that also includes the Romans, because Christianity, well, there is, of course you can say that many of the things that shaped the modern world and the shape the world from religion stem from Christianity, but how foundational is Christianity to that, and how much more foundational to that is the Roman Empire in general? I mean, I think Christianity established as a universal religion because of the institutional capacities provided by the Roman Empire. And also, don't forget that for example, what establishes in the Catholic Church, remember that the word Catholic means that, wide-ranging, because it's supposed to be an all-encompassing institution. I hope that made sense.
This just goes back to what we said earlier about politics and religion being very intertwined. Sort of these religious movements are sort of solidified by the political entities they are within.
In the ancient world, politics and religion were the exact same thing. I mean, it's not, for example, war. It was not a conflict between people. It was understood as a conflict between God first, or most essentially. For example, Yahweh defeated Baal because the Israelites defeated the Canaanites, conquered Canaan. So it's not seen as it's not only seen as in Hebrews conquering Canaanites. It's a battle of Yahweh defeating Baal. So it's basically the same thing. Like religion and politics are one and the same in the ancient person's mind.
Wait, God even talks about setting up a kingdom, right? Alexander, you have your hand up. Go for it.
Well, I mean, it's not really exactly tied to what he was saying, but I think even if a religion is universal, it's not expressed universally, and that even if you have an empire that's has one faith, every segment will have its own version of that, and it will just naturally kind of splinter off and have its own kind of ceremonies and so on and so on. So I guess even if something is universal, doesn't mean that it can't be exclusive to you. It's about how you express it and in relation to who you are in your group, in your subgroup.
I just want to say, because I have to go to bed very soon, you say there will be a kingdom that God makes. The God is Jupiter and the king is me. Good night, everybody. I love you all.
Good night, my friend. Thank you for coming.
Gio, you were very disrespectful, pushing the keyboard with your fat sausage fingers, interrupting the chat. I'm very mad.
Oh, I thought it was muted. I'm very sorry.
No, Phoebus going to come and punish you with his divine light, Gio. You better be careful, man.
I break it
off.
Well,
you can smoke these sausage fingers. Catch you.
Good night.
Good night.
So where do we take it from here? I think we covered a lot of ground here.
Stuff is wrapping up a bit. This was like a thing for sort of people doing creative and artistic stuff from a religious God-pilled perspective. Does anyone want to just talk about or promote stuff they're doing? I can start if anybody. I think a religious revival and aesthetic revival really are probably going to go and probably have to go hand in hand. I got as pilled as I am now partly through art and through just taking beauty seriously and taking
100%. I agree. 100%.
Yeah, the beauty side of things, the aesthetic side, seems to have influenced quite a few people. I'd be curious to hear if there was a moment or what you're making that's been inspired by it. Yeah, I'm cool with that.
I got some.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, so the whole, coming back into Christianity and, through my trials and tribulations of experiencing with my experience in life, I realized that, you come to an understanding, when you come to an understanding of oneself that you are in the image of God and God created you, you are too a creator. So it's okay, the best thing you can do in your life is to create. So create something of any form. What I realized I liked doing was, I mean, everyone loves games. I'm actually developing a card game that inspired me heavily. It's going to be probably very Christian in a sense. So it opened my mind to be creative, and it's been an extensive work, and it's just me right now. I don't have like a team or anything, but I'm just has the underpinning. So I think that once you come to that realization of like your own creativity and unlock that potential within yourself, you'll be in a really, really happy and a good place, in my opinion. People just need to do, like, literally just do hobbies, create things. Like I got into baking. I never was baking. I got into baking. Like, you just do cool shit once you realize that stuff. Like, you just take the time to do something creative.
Are you part of the Odd Church Discord?
No.
That might be something interesting for you. I'll maybe tweet the link or something. It's a bunch of Christians that are most of them are game developers.
Oh, cool. Okay, cool. That'd be great. Thanks.
Alexander, you got your hand up. What's up?
Hi. Yeah, I guess I'm not necessarily I would say I'm more religious now, and that's part because of aesthetics. Because I was always like fascinated by like why do people make ugly things, and that kind of led me to think about how does beauty exist in such a weirdly real way? It's like beauty is such a kind of an intangible and a tangible at the same time, and it is kind of like a natural form that exists, and so I was like, well, how do you even get that, and how do you achieve beauty? And a lot of it is due to a very limiting approach to life. It's like you're limiting the fat, you're limiting excesses that get in the way of that beauty, and there's a certain intolerance that comes with certain things that could produce beauty. Like, beauty is a result of like a conflict that produces something that is extremely real, because it essentially passed the slap around test. It's like essentially you build something after years of like applying pressure onto it with and exhausting yourself, and you produce something beautiful, and you get to the core of things. And I thought about like, okay, well, how do you like, and so if those principles that kind of get you to the beauty, and if you applied them, it becomes essentially it's a duty. Like, duty is the same thing. It's like duty is self-sacrifice. It's limitations upon yourself, and then essentially, and so in order to produce beauty, you have to have a sense of duty, and a devotion, and that kind of approach to life rings very close to how people express faith and how religious people live life, and I think this is kind of like my roundabout way of reaching God. It's like, even if you don't necessarily believe like totally everything you read in the Bible, the stories start adding up when you start like kind of finding problems and trying to address them. It's kind of like when you do mathematics. You eventually end up like you have to end up learning all the mathematics, like the structures around it.
Question for you real quick. Sorry to interrupt you, but any chance have you read Kierkegaard?
No, but I was supposed to. My class
you cheated. The way you listed it off is Kierkegaardian to like the highest extent. I highly recommend you read Kierkegaard, because
I'm telling you,
you got initiated through the aesthetics, and then you listed out the ethical, and then you came to the religious sense, and that's like the 3-step triad process of Kierkegaard. Dude, you're right on the spot. That's crazy to even hear that.
I feel like the low IQ meme. Like,
no. If you're able to articulate that in your own words and without even reading, like, people don't even realize that there's certain things in life that they experience that like some guy has written about. Like people have Kantian notions, all that shit. But I was just really impressed. So that's really cool, man. That's awesome.
Can you follow, dude? Well, I don't need compliments. Any follows, dude. Come on.
What you said was there's a Guyanese phrase, sugarcane sweet but so bitter to me. It's about being a sugarcane plantation worker, and that's kind of about that. That's what made me think of that. does take ugliness to create beauty. I think anything you can do that is creative and hardworking in your own life, because we don't live in like a patriarchal ideal of like eating our own cabbages that we grew from the ground and everything. It's very important to keep some kind of semblance of, so that sugarcane is not so bitter to you.
I would be totally cool too if people shilled some stuff that was related to this topic. Rip Bozo, you mentioned the game. I don't think you mentioned the name.
Well,
if it's public.
No, I don't actually have a solidified name for it yet. So that's just, I want to get to the I'm like in demo with my close friends. We're demoing it out because they're all heavy, like autistic magic friends. So they're really into that stuff. So I was like, oh, these are the perfect people to try it out on. But I want to, in the future, if anyone follows for gaming or that stuff, I'm going to be like listing it out and like have like things on it eventually. But yeah, it's still in demo.
Steph, did you have anything? Or even like, I would also be interested to hear back to, I can't remember who brought this up. Maybe it was Mo, but like, if you don't have something yourself, I'm just kind of generally trying to figure out who all is making interesting things out there, whether it's you or someone else.
I'm the co-editor of a publishing company called Ondata Express, and we are not like a religious publisher. We do not have like a stance as like a lot of publishers around us try to be like anti-capitalist publisher or queer publisher. We're just focused on art, but we're committed to like platforming, creating space for stuff that art that doesn't necessarily fit it within like the sort of secular orthodoxy. There's like we hosted a guy, I don't know if a guy Mark DiSaverio at our reading, who's kind of got canceled from the Canadian lit scene for writing a very religious and also kind of conspiratorial and kind of cringe but kind of brilliant epic called Credo di Volta. But like we're publishing about one print book a year of just stuff that like meets our just like outsider stuff that is not really like getting in, fitting in anywhere else. And we're also running a serial fiction journal called Hollow House with like 7 ongoing novels serialized in installments. Yeah.
I don't have anything to really promote. I just I make music. I haven't put anything out in a long time, but I have like a SoundCloud that like I have like mixes on. If anyone's like interested in that, it's like not really it's just other people's music. But I will likely put out something full length this year. I'm really been working hard to make that happen. So trying to make something that I is not really like anything else, and I think it will be. So if you want to stick around,
That's nice. So now that we're talking about promoting stuff, I don't have anything like concrete to promote. I'm a writer and I have DJ. Like I'm a huge vinyl guy who plays like obscure music on several radio stations and stuff. But I'm also a devout anti-capitalist, but I am also a devout Catholic. And I would love to create like a podcast in which I talk to a creative person in terms not only on their creative output, but also in terms of their faith, on how they navigate their lives as creators and their existence as creation, as a person that expresses that belief and expresses their faith. I would love to explore that more deeply in the future. So please stay tuned. And if you want to come on the podcast to collaborate or to do something together, I'm here. You can DM me, and I'll be very happy.
I am not of the same faith, but I'd love to do something like that. So, Yeah, I'll keep an eye on that.
We don't have to be of the same faith, because that's the point of the point of it all is to contrast. How do we express what is inexpressible? How do we express everything that's beyond? Well, beyond.
Yeah. No, that sounds really cool. I'd love to hear more from this and hear other people's stuff.
If I could recommend anything before I have to go, it's just Dean Blunt, Michael Levy, the opera Inna, INNA. It's all on YouTube. Someone took a video of it. It's good. Watch it. And I have to go.
Night.
All right. Night.
Gio, what's up? Yeah, thanks for joining, guys. Gio, what were you gonna say?
Oh yeah, for shilling. Well, I'm an artist, so if anyone wants to DM me buy one of my prints or my paintings, but also my co-host on Break the Rules podcast, and we were supposed to have Jay Dyer tomorrow, but he unfortunately had to backstep. But we'll have a debate nevertheless. I think it's on the history of Christ and the Roman Empire, but also in terms of new creative projects. And I'm also a judge for the Passage Prize by Lomez in the visual arts section. And Zero HP Lovecraft is doing, I think, the short stories, and Moldbug is doing the poetry, and I forget who's doing the essays. I think it's Benjamin Braddock. But I've picked 3 winners, and they are all of a very unique religious perspective in the visual arts section. So it's going to be phenomenal. I think that we have to encourage more artists to actually create spaces for themselves, because people were talking about before about like what is the artistic process. I think that when you enter the dimension of faith, there has to be a sort of serious conviction as to the world that you're trying to create through the work of art. And there has to be a serious reflection on how the work of art within a religious context isn't just a cathartic element, but also does it, like people were talking about beauty. I think that beauty is the way that people talk about it nowadays. It's some kind of like reified property we have to capture still. Beauty is something that comes about through an organic and natural process of the work of art itself. It's not something I think that, and this is where a lot of like aesthetic posters nowadays get it wrong, is that it's not some kind of like property you can easily fit into a category as a sort of like, weaponized pastiche of what beauty is against like what an idea of like, beauty against the modern world or something like that. I mean, of course, yes, beauty against the modern world, but it's the way that people talk about beauty, I find, is like almost counterproductive to the actual aesthetic and artistic production of beauty itself, if that makes sense. Because people, they talk about this something that we have to recapture, something we have to create, but the actual steps of that creation is something different than just presenting it already as a total picture, which is my problem with a lot of these aesthetic posters on Twitter. So yeah, follow my work and all that stuff. Follow my Substack, my YouTube channel, Break the Rules. Please buy my art, please. Starving artist here. So thank you very much. This has been great. I've loved the conversation. And Alexander, you have something to say, so go for it, my brother.
Yeah, I agree with Gio here. I think this kind of relates to what I was saying beforehand, is that like I think the reason I made this Twitter account, I'm like a bajillion at this point, is because I was like, all right, I just want to have a space where like we could just talk about art and certain like films and so on, just very much focused on that. And also I see that I didn't know like there's a bunch of like lefties here, but I don't really care for that. But I do see that there's
oh
like,
God,
this, like,
no!
yeah, my heart.
I'm done for.
I think there's like a distinction between like the previous era and the current era. I think like the people here kind of have this like sense that we live in an empire, and we should like kind of find peace in this and not try to like rule each other. And I think that's kind of like a good thing with these Twitter spaces. Like you kind of get at people that aren't trying to enforce their will on others, and there's a certain respect for one another we're kind of building, which is good. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to do, where like, I'm not trying to like self-promote another space here because I haven't even done one, but I just want to do like weekly poetry readings with randoms, like from not like a stupid centrist, but essentially with different people in the in this kind of general space, and just encourage more artistic production and discussion that isn't tied to just pure cynicism, which I will for years fight against. I think it's like the worst thing the internet produces. So I think anti-cynical action is a great great approach to this stuff. And what Gio was saying is that, like, it kind of reminds me of like the picture of the painting by Michelangelo, the Sistine Chapel, where the fingers are almost sort of like the planes. I'm being hunted down. The where the fingers are almost touching. I know it doesn't necessarily mean like what I'm about to say, but like it's like there's this kind of space, like of ambiguity, like the big other space, and art is trying to manage that and engage with that. It's like there's that space we go into, and when having a God on your side kind of helps you navigate that space. And what happens is that people that see that big other and don't have that God on their side, they kind of like get lost in that space, and they never really like come back with anything really meaningful. So yeah, that's all I'll say.
Yeah, I also don't know if there's like we kind of just like, I've been involved in this kind of like exploration mode of like what's happening artistically within this space, and then Max and I talked, and then we're like, hey, let's just throw together this spaces. I don't know if there even needs to be next steps, but I am curious just to like figure out what, I don't know. I just want to stay more involved, and I'll probably end up following like most people in here because I want to see what they're working on. But was there one thing I also did want to hear? I mean, we I think it was, I don't remember the person's name. I think it was like blank or something. But I'd be curious to hear like there's a lot of guys who spoke. I'd be curious if there's anyone else like that, any other like takes, like especially if there's like any women who had like any other experiences that maybe were different. I'm just curious in general. I don't know if anyone wants to speak up though. You don't have to, obviously.
I'm actually a woman, so I just have a voice changer. It's to be a guy.
Well, there you go. Done. Check. I also wouldn't classify myself as a lefty, Alexander. So, I know there's a few people in here earlier who wouldn't either. But
I didn't mean that as a pejorative. I mean, I'm just saying that like there's probably some left wing people here, but in the more maybe the fiscal sense, maybe like their approach to life, not like necessarily like weirdo communists.
Well, the thing with me as a leftist, he's a very proud leftist, is that I don't find it strange because I'm from Latin America, where the most radical revolutionary leftist movements have come literally from the most devout Catholics and the most devout religious people. Remember that there is the history of liberation theology. So we understood like very early on how, for example, the teachings of the historical Jesus were also a materialist analysis of his time and a critique against empire. And those two elements are central to leftist ideas and leftist politics. So it is curious because the religious, let's call it the religious discourse, at least in the US, has been co-opted or absorbed mostly by the right. But I think the context of faith, there is a leftist reading, there's a materialist reading, and I think I'm finding kindred spirits in everywhere in the world that are proud leftists and have like of different tendencies, but that are not weirdos, that are not creeps, and that also share a profound commitment to community, to people, to humanity, and to God.
Well, I'd like to debate you on that, actually, about the liberation, materialist reading Christianity. I would love to have a discussion with that with you, Lionel. So that's very interesting.
So I'm actually going to be heading out right now, but I wanted to add a little bit to Gio when he was talking about like art and faith. It kind of goes back, boiling down real quick. I'm just going to make it real quick, but like from the artistic perspective of anyone being able to be creative, to me, everyone is in some way creative. They just haven't found their potentiality and what they can create. You just got to find it at first, and again, you have to have your reliance on your own faith in oneself to create. So it's kind of like an intertwined like thing that you almost feedback loop yourself into. Like, you can do this stuff. It's not off the table for you. You just have to give yourself the ability to see within oneself that you can do it. So if anyone ever struggles with that kind of thing, just honestly, just try anything. Just throw yourself to something creative, and you'll be surprised at what you can do. Like, just do it. Like, don't think that, oh, I'm just not a creative person. No, you have it within you. Do not ever think that. But it was great talking. Thank you for letting me speak. But you have a good night, guys. I follow most of you, so hopefully I'll see you again.
Night.
Good night, my friend.
I found it interesting that you were talking about liberation theology. Lionel, what do you think about like maybe Western, like quote unquote leftists or progressives kind of co-opting liberation theology in their own context? And I'm speaking from an Islamic context, where I see a lot of people talking about liberation theology, trying to integrate that, but maybe they don't understand quite what it means. I don't know if you follow any maybe American media and have seen that kind of thing from maybe the more progressive strand in America.
Well, I think they don't get the complete dimension of what liberation theology is to peoples in the global south. Here in Latin America, there was always an anti-imperialist impulse and also a decolonialist impetus from liberation theology. And of course, it's hard to dimension it's hard to fully grasp from people that literally live in the empire and benefit from the empire. Because the thing with Westerners is that there's a lot of self-analysis that they should have if they claim to be leftists and progressives, because as inhabitants of the Western world, what the Western world has built, even if they are allowed to critique it, they should never forget that the abuse and the imperialism that made their whole existence possible was done in their name. Like, for example, that's a debate I have with specifically with Mexicans. I'm Mexican. With Mexicans that have European origins, is that they are, like, I always remind them that they're remnants of a dynamic, of an imperial dynamic that was done in their name and for their benefit. So there is always
What's wrong with that, though? Like, I mean, I hate to stop you, but I think, like, it's like, people do great things for their kids and for their own. And I think to say that you're privileged, it's not really a hit. It's like, yeah, your ancestors like built something great for you and for you. It's not like, it's like, what about me doesn't really like invalidate the other people's thing. It's also, of course, you don't want to be too crude with others, but I think privilege is a good thing, and you want your ancestors to give you privilege in society.
That seems very opposed to the Christian. I'm not even, again, exactly a Christian here, but I feel like the idea of building great things on the backs of and at the expense of others for your own is like, that's the that's the ideology of the Roman Empire. That's not the ideology of Christ. But I also feel like we're this close to just collapsing into a political argument. So
I just want to say the liberation thing. The liberation thing with that's what I was saying is that we are all kind of here because we are kind of disenfranchised from the empire, and we don't want conflict within the empire, and by that I mean the kind of the neoliberal empire that expands outside of the U.S. and that's what I'm saying is that like the liberation ideology, it only works in contrast to something, so that's why like you'll find that there's a better connection between, let's say, like the dissident right and some sort of like some sort of people seeking liberation on the left, is because like both are kind of disenfranchised by the regime that's in power, and that's also in part why the liberals who are integrated into the regime are less likely to be aligned with you, because like they don't see you as people oppressed. They like that's not how it works. Like if you think of like all the hawks, for example, in the conflict, who are they? It's a bunch of centrist and liberal people who are part of the institutional hierarchy, and so they are very much part of the empire. The people not part of the empires are of course never going to like it because they don't really benefit off it. I think you also have to remember, like, not just because people have a higher standard of living doesn't mean that they're the ones still like there's still a relative scale of who's actually benefiting from the empire.
Yeah, that's pretty fair.
What about, okay, let's move to, was it Strange Lift? You've had your hand up for a minute. Like the dog icon, like avatar.
That's a chicken.
Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry. I like had a little fumble because you called me Strangle Lift, which is just hilarious. Yeah, so I don't really want to come up here and have a political... Yeah. I don't want to come up here and have a political talk. Is that okay?
Yeah, please don't.
Okay, for sure. So someone in here was talking about art earlier and like doing art even though you are bad at it. So that's totally cool. You should do that anyway. All right. You should never let something like that diminish you. The reason that I think you should not do this is because I think there is an essence of like religiosity that I think that I'm particularly coming to appreciate about Christianity in particular, because that's how I like interface with it, I suppose. I think like if you look at Twitter for any protracted amount of time, you're going to run into people talking about dating, and it's all people who haven't made it, like trying to talk about how they can make it, even though everyone of those like sad and bitter. And the best thing that they're doing is like trying to create a simulacrum through which they can flirt with each other under the most tortured pretext possible, right? This is because what people are trying to do is they're trying to apply a rationalist lens to this thing, which is by definition irrational. It is not comprehensible. Okay, you can conceive of like everybody here has heard the phrase of like horrors that are inconceivable, but for some reason no one likes to think about the sublime like this. Okay, the sublime is totally mind-breaking, right? It's not something that can be comprehended. There's a passage in the book by a guy named William R. Byrd, who is a World War I vet, and he goes on to describe what courage is, and he talks about it in two contexts. First is like the romantic idea of it, which is like, there are video games made about courageous young twinks who go and like, smack down bats with like a sword and all this, that, and the other. When in reality, courage operates very much at a lizard brain level. It's not people who have time to like rationalize and go down this long-winded like ethical treatise on why they should do the thing that will likely kill them. They just do it anyway. They're not thinking. They're acting very, very subconsciously. The romance actually comes in the moment where you see this person doing this, who is defying all logic and all rationality and behaving in a way that is like exemplary of the sublime anti-rationality that humanity is capable of. So that is ultimately what I wanted to come up in here and say, which is that I appreciate, shout out to the anti-rationality of the sublime, of the sublimity of divinity, so to speak, is the best thing in the known universe. Whenever the Lord answers my prayers, they are the most hilarious thing on the face of the planet. Recently, I had to dump like over $1,000 in my truck because it just wasn't cooperating. Like one thing broke after another, after another, after another. So I did the only thing I knew how to do and pray about it, and was reminded yet again that when God answers prayers, he does so in the most boss manner possible. He just decided, you know what, instead of bestowing upon my son riches or, a new job or anything of the sort, what he does instead is he offers me up an opportunity on a golden plate to take a motorcycle, which is not fast, it is slow. Okay? Just an old Honda Skyline from 1992. Perfect. He even knew how to fit it to only the Lord would know that the thing that tickles me the most whenever my soul is despairing is the concept of having a long red scarf riding down the road and a motorcycle that goes 60 miles per hour, maybe. That is hilarious. Shout outs to the divine. It is it is one of the most positive forces we're continuing on in the face of the planet. Shout outs to God. Shout outs to anti-rationality. Rationalists get cucked forever. You guys defeated yourself long ago with the car's evil demon, and you guys deserve to ride in neurotic paralysis until the end of eternity. That's all.
Oh my God, nothing could follow that up. I mean, brother, you have to come on BTR. That was amazing.
I have to come on what?
Break the rules, my friend. Break the rules.
Oh, that's your podcast, right?
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm blown away.
Yeah, it is what it is. Appreciate you guys having me. I'm actually about to go to the gym. I'm going to go brave this ice that is everywhere. Pray for me to not die, I suppose. All right, peace, y'all.
Done. Yeah, thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was an awesome point too. The how the sublime will break you. That at least resonates with me a lot.
Yeah, I think it really bothers me. I guess I hate rationalists. I think I'm adjacent to that Twitter sphere probably more than else. I just it's completely ruining the order of operations for humanity in a weird way. People can't conceive of the way humans interact with one another without this contractual basis that I think rationality preserves. I think everybody has heard of, oh, well, love is just reducible to chemicals. There's no way that can be correct. There's no way that can be correct. Because there is something that everybody desires in the mind-breaking component of love, where someone's love for you makes no sense. Why would another human being do this for me? Right? It makes no sense why someone would want to be with me or would want to spend time with me or would, make things by hand for me, who would have their heart filled by my interaction in their life. It does not make sense. To reduce this to just a simple matter of biochemistry is frankly projecting your own minuscule feelings about your own life, and I'm not having any part of that. All right, I think life rules. I think we were given this for a very good reason, because it is capable of such moments of sublime, rapturous beauty, and the idea that can be even if it is correct, yes, that you can go eat some chocolate or whatever, and feel what it feels in order to be in love is just such a dumb facsimile of what is actually going on. It's such a way to devalue what is possible because your own experience is that of I don't know, living life as a squalid miscreant. That's not all of us, brother. Can't stand it. You're just gonna make me pop off over here.
So,
hey, Alexander, I know you got your hand up. So let's go to you, and then if there's anybody else too that's got something that hasn't said anything, we'd love to have you come up, and share some stuff. Alexander, why don't you go for it?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of yes and the orange chicken dog, Avi. Yeah, I mean that's kind of going back to what I said about living in the ambiguity. It's and that and how you kind of enter that space and then come out of it is where you kind of make great things. And I think a lot of times people get overwhelmed by it and they try to over define it. And they define it with things that are easy to define, it's very easy to define things that kind of disgust you. And then you try to harness that kind of that feeling and you impose it upon upon yourself, because if the big other can consume you, and then you feel like you're part of the big other, I am the other, I'm other. So it's kind of nihilistic kind of approach where you're forced to define so much in contrast to it, and there's no real liberation from that kind of that mindset, because there's nothing strong enough to pull you out except just accepting that you just can't look at that space and try to take it in totally. you kind of have to like make peace with that space and engage with it on a more amicable way. And then
right. So yeah. This is what I mean. This is what I mean when I say that, like, not to cut you off, but I think this is precisely what I mean when I say, like, it's something that shouldn't mind break you. Okay. I guess the reason that talking about art in particular, like, really gets to me is because when I was a kid, I, like, did a bunch of piano recitals. I would, like, draw all the time. I really, really wanted very specifically to be an artist when I grew up. Okay. That did not pan out. And even now, like, you know, I've played death metal shows live. Like, I've caused people to like make a mosh pit. I've played multiple instruments live. You know, I've written for journals and magazines and have published fiction. Right. I still don't feel like it is possible for me to be a quote unquote artist. Right. Where like the mind breaking reality of things comes in, however, is though this is my standard and it's born from like it's born from the similar like rational association, which is like, well, I'm doing the things that artists are doing. You know, I'm putting a pen on paper and I'm drawing a picture of a pretty lady in a dress, like underneath, you know, a column of flowers or whatever. You know, I'm spending time learning all these like dead calligraphic hands to make these exquisite pages. Like I'm going through the steps that an artist would take, knowing that I will never do anything that will like, it will never be a picture that hangs in any sort of gallery that someone will buy for like $350 or even $20. That's not going to be me. It's never going to be me. Okay.
Can I add something? Oh, sorry.
Well, let me dovetail it into this. What I've come to realize is that frankly does not matter. That's not the whole of the thing. The reality is that I would want to create art regardless. Okay. The reality is that I want to do something beautiful regardless. So whether or not I make some like beautiful emblazoned manuscript which sells for $1 gazillion is thoroughly irrelevant. But what it will grant me, this is where like the mind-breaking sublimity comes in, is it will give me the ability to make the most beautiful love letter that man has ever seen. It will give me the ability to give something to someone that will further extend that component of a love that is mind-breaking, because they'll open up that letter, they'll see what I have made to them that no one will ever have. It is extraordinarily powerful. And to call it not art is wrong. It's just wrong. That is very much what it is. But it's motivated by something entirely different, something that I'm able to accept now and something that I am thoroughly grateful for, despite the fact I'll never like sell a painting to anybody. That is almost irrelevant at that point.
So I just want to say something on that question. I think, you know, it reminds me of you know, there's a lot of shitty movies out there, you know. They make really bad movies, like these I don't know, like there's a bunch of movies out there. You name any of them, right? And for me, like what I find interesting about watching really shitty films, or people that try to make good films and they try to like present their vision of the world, I find that like kind of like it is an interesting thing to look at, because you are looking at like a human lens, you know, like this is what this person sees. And I kind of think of it, I mean, I hate to bring this up again, but like think of the IQ thing, right? But not like, but just look at it as more of like, this is an interpretation of the world, and that line graph is like a part of like a slice of reality that people are seeing, you know? And so for me, I find it curious and interesting of how people kind of perceive things, and that perception and that and then how they replicate how they see the world is a form of art in itself, because they are essentially co-creating a reality that they see. And of course, in that production of what they see, there is a scale. Like there is like a people that achieve like a very high scale of mastery of the production of art and beauty. And beauty, of course, you know, you can measure things that are beautiful and not, but you can't say. I mean, I don't say like what is art and isn't, but you could say that the attempt to capture what you see and not be kind of spiteful of what you see, which again maybe could go back to that as if like you're interpreting reality. You know, that kind of is art to me. It's like their interpretation of reality, regardless of how shitty it is. The attempt to understand things is a production of art. Now then you can like, but again, I'm not a populist in that I think there is great art, and that is just something that comes out of like, you know, genius and your ability to really go deep into that abyss and come back with something that touches everyone, because it is so intrinsic to everyone.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you like intentionally made a nod to James Blake or what when you talk about artistic genius. I think James Blake had a lot of interesting stuff to say about that, and I spend a lot of time thinking about that, about how I think there is a desire to see art be cynical and sort of spiteful and resentful, and to effectively create like a spiteful and resentful. I think everybody knows about Piss Christ, right? Nobody here needs that explained to them. It's one of the most infamously like cynical pieces of art ever created. It's disgusting. That picture of the toilet with like the autograph on it is disgusting. That stuff's disgusting.
Actually, Piss Christ. I have to disagree about Piss Christ.
Same here.
Well, look, when I say that they're disgusting, this is coming from somebody who regularly listens to like black and death metal. Okay, I think that disgust has a place, right? Like I think that sort of thing has a place. But I think that like while I agree that this sort of art should be allowed to exist, I mean, obviously, I think that there is something that is, I don't know why, this recalls this like tweet that someone made about King of the Hill of all things, where they were like, one of the reasons that King of the Hill endures so much is because it is kind. And I think that is interesting because I think there's probably something deeper going on there, which is I think that there is a complete saturation of like spiteful and ugly and resentful and disgusting art. And I think that it's getting to the point now where rather than there being some overwhelming desire for things that are just kind or, you know, happy or pure or whatever, I think what's actually happening is we're moving into like, I don't know what else to call it other than like a post-edgelord era where that stuff doesn't really seem like brave anymore. That stuff doesn't really seem like impactful or like it's making any sort of useful, like constructive suggestion about the way the world could be. Like there's no suggestion in the possibility for new meaning in any of it. And I think that's ultimately what it is. People want new meaning, right? Like commies and trads alike kind of share in this inability to imagine a future with new meaning. That's why they both like these German ideologies that are like, you know, bordering on 200 years old at this point, right? There's nothing new. There's no possibility for new meaning. And I think that's reflected in the cultural zeitgeist, right? Because all movies are just remakes of old things. There's no new IPs, even Dune. Like, you know, the internet's most favored child of last year is a remake of a movie, which was thus an adaptation of a book. I mean, we are like plundering nostalgia up at this point because the idea of new meaning is almost impossible to imagine. And I just don't think it's going to come from like Piss Christ. And I don't think it's going to come from like pictures of toilets with an autograph and such. I just don't think that's where it's going to come from.
Well, so let's do Lionel. But before that, the Piss Christ thing was actually more of a commentary on corruption in the church and other things like that. And the urinal was a comment on what's art, and I thought it was pretty funny. But anyway, Lionel.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention, that the urinal thing from Marcel Duchamp was a commentary on what is art because of this, back then, this overtly rationalist and closed down, gate-kept notion of what art was and what beauty was. And here it is strangely talking about how sick he is of rationalism, and I understand that because there's no space for, again, people communicate sometimes in terms of the sublime. But, well, what I was going to mention about King of the Hill being kind, and you have a really strong point about it, because I believe kindness, true kindness, like an art that truly cares for expressing kindness, is what's truly radical in this super polarized and overtly derisive time. Like we've reached a level of really stupid cynicism that we're not able to dream anymore. We're not able to wonder anymore, and that's a problem. Not only an aesthetic and cultural problem, it is a problem in our perception of ourselves.
No, yeah, for sure. I think I think that's 100% correct. I think that there's like some sort of tacit agreement there that's happening actually. I think this is gonna like out me as being way too online, I suppose. But if you like look at the overlap between the quote unquote dissident right and the quote unquote like post left or whatever it is, I think this is exemplary of like where this convergence is lying. I think people have some sort of idea that there is some like nebulous component of humanity that is absolutely being gutted and trampled upon. And you kind of like know it when you see it. It's you can't. I guess in that aspect, it's like pornography. You can't really point at it to any one thing. And the inverse of that would be like anarchists who are supporting mandates and such, where it's just like this makes zero sense. This makes literally zero sense. Like I don't know how someone could have this position and not think about it for like a minute and understand how completely schizophrenic and illogical this is to have, like divorce from its actual historical context, which is 100% of all it is. But yeah, I think the inverse of that is this nebulous idea that seems to be emerging, and it seems to be emerging like independent of any sort of like political ideal, or well, I shouldn't say completely independent, but independent enough to be kind of like inscrutable, where there is a sense that there is some fundamental unkindness that is happening. Whether it's like, you know, talking about how great sex work is, and it's like, okay, well, this is just ushering young girls into being abused and such, right? Like this seems to be becoming like an acknowledgement that is made almost across platform. So I do think that this is starting to like show its head whenever it comes to art, I suppose, where people are starting to understand that maybe what we need is something that is like sincere enough to acknowledge like the common humanity that is still left in a world that just wants to like grind up guts and such. Okay, but I gotta go lift. Y'all have a great night.
See ya. Brand, what's up? Murad.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was now the strangers have left, and maybe I could ask some of the other artists here. I'm not an artist myself, but I read a lot of like mystical poetry from the Sufi tradition. And part of their thought process is that like a lot of them were in a mystical state when they started composing poetry. I'm wondering for the artists here, how is that part of your process, or do you kind of experience that either in when you're creating, or even if you could maybe, if you feel like a connection with God can be translated through your artistic product, visual or otherwise?
Curiously enough, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but curiously enough, I'm a musician, but I'm usually like playing percussions and sort of stuff. But I think I express my connection to God more effectively and more profoundly, not when I'm composing, but when I'm improvising. And that's why what quote unquote the masters of spiritual jazz were mostly people who dabbled in improvisation, because they understood that planned proceedings were sometimes an obstacle to reaching that the ineffable. Even Ornette Coleman once said that he was that his collective improvisation were like religious communal experiences. So I believe, like, in my experience, I get that mostly from improvisation rather than composition, for example.